It's Friday, December 6th. As I record this, we're about an hour and a half into the trade day for the stock market here in the US. And I'm going to do a few things actually that I normally don't do in this video. The first is I've moved things around in the background. I've kind of recalibrated everything in studio. And normally I use a virtual screen behind me, but I had someone complain about that. So in this video, I've just got the blurred background, very plain walls behind me. Let me know in the comments if you like this look better or the other look, or if you're indifferent. Thank you. I appreciate it. Now let's talk. And the first thing I want to get into before we get to the fake news and FUD and then crushing some of those things is at the ticker on the bottom of the screen. I've got the three short-term stock price indicators, especially for NIO, that I have in mind and keep in mind. And so, for example, number one being the trade volume. And so far, as I said, it's about an hour and a half into the trade day, and there are a little over 16 million shares that have been traded of NIO. This is not a huge number. And in fact, if we want to look at the history and then tie in the FTDs, which is the second thing on the ticker, the FTDs have been elevated and spiking, including these three big spikes all in this year of 2024. We did not see spikes this high dating back to before the big run for NIO stock, and that was in early 2020 and late 2019. But as you'll note here, we've got a lot more clutter with the FTDs, which are represented by the white lines. And in conjunction with that time frame, we've seen the NIO stock price come down. Also, perhaps there's a correlation with when there were some ETP filings, some different things in Europe that were filed in this time frame, where perhaps those gave an advantage or another opportunity for shorts to maybe target this thing and take it down. I don't think NIO is the only one being targeted in this way, but I did think that the timeframes were interesting, so I mentioned it in a recent video. And now for the sentiment, the third thing, which I think you can almost measure based on, in part, sometimes by the trade volume. For example, when we've seen NIO stock make the enormous moves that it was making in this time frame, we would see hundreds of millions of shares traded daily. And so that perhaps is an indicator that there was a lot of positive bullish sentiment for NIO stock at that time. Even in the short term, in this time frame, where we've seen big moves up in this shorter term in the last year or two, it has often been with 100 million shares traded or more on the daily side of things. So that's just, a little of what I keep in mind with respect to the short term. But now let's get into a little more of the sentiment, because there's so much fake news and FUD going on. And so this is one of the things I'm going to do in the video. I'm going to be critical of a few other folks. First off, this guy, the Electric Viking. This is a video he dropped 10 days ago. And I've paused it right here because I almost started laughing when I heard him say that BYD could do a hostile takeover of NIO if they wanted. And so let's keep this really simple. I get that he's a big clickbaiter, big hypester. In fact, his channel, I've seen it 10x from where he used to be with his subs, and that sort of seems to be aligned with a lot of Tesla pumping. And also, he's done a lot of negative Chinese stock and Chinese videos, and so maybe those things helped him build to the 250,000 plus subscriber base. I don't know, but I do know 34,000 views on this video from 10 days ago, and he is saying that BYD could do a hostile takeover from NIO. So let's just go here first. Investopedia, keeping it really simple. What is a hostile takeover? And really what I was looking for is, what do we need to see for this to even be in play or possible? A hostile takeover is an acquisition strategy requiring that the entity acquire and control more than 50% of the voting shares issued by the company. Now, folks, I like to nerd out on research. And so there are a couple of things that came to mind. I thought, well, I don't think that BYD has any chance of being able to do that. However, what about CYVN? Because they've made a couple of big investments into NIO and have bought a lot of shares. But this was even as of December 18, 2023. And that's why I pulled this up. I said we can have this reference point, and then we'll go to the annual SEC filings for NIO and look at kind of what the actual voting aggregate percentages are. So first off, CYVN, and this is the part I highlighted. The reason I highlighted it is it looks like William Li sort of gave CYVN this optionality where they could either have a couple of board seats and fewer shares or a lesser percentage, or they could have a higher percentage or more of a percentage of shares and one board seat. But even if we come over here and look at the SEC filing, from NIO, this is the most recent one. What you'll note is, although the shares are broken down over here, the percentage of aggregate voting power is over here. And even though CYVN has more shares, they have only a 13.4% voting aggregate power versus William Li, who has 38.5%. And this founder vehicles, which you've got the sort of reference to 9, which is representing another 38.5%. And that is, I've highlighted it, essentially this is all controlled by William Li. So William Li actually maintains 77% control. So there is no possible way that BYD or anyone else could do a hostile takeover of NIO. And that's kind of my long-winded way of saying why I never watch anything that guy puts out, Electric Viking. So good luck to him with the clickbait, the FUD, the all whatever, and let's keep it moving. Sorry, I'm being brutally honest because this is already a long enough video. I know it's going to be long, and I don't like doing these videos because it sounds like I'm being disparaging. But if I want to be in research mode and stay there, I need to have credible sources. And so with that, I did want to mention this as well, because if we want to look at big picture, and I've mentioned this, but I haven't offered specifics. So for example, the partners, CYVN, and also sort of the backing and the awareness and support from the Middle East, the UAE, in Egypt, even if one wanted to just start looking into how much net worth some of these folks have, and then also why the alignment and the partnership is so important for NIO from the standpoint of not having to do conventional capital raises, it means they can tap and get more money if they need from their partners, whether it's CYVN, whether it's the folks in the Middle East, or whether it's the folks from NIO China and or in Hefei in China. So they are beautifully positioned. But this is the highlighted point that I wanted to offer specific to this video. William Li, the founder, chairman, and CEO of NIO, said of this partnership, our collaboration with CYVN Holdings is a cornerstone in our strategy to enhance global accessibility to smart electric vehicles and to push the boundaries of technological innovation. With CYVN's support, NIO is poised to accelerate its international business scope and bring innovative EV technologies to users in the MENA region. So I'm taking this as a nod, and this is William Li kind of cueing us in, those of us paying attention, that this is a positioning for global expansion. So I like hearing that. I like knowing that. I wanted to point it out in case people weren't aware of it. This came through in the recent comment section on my video, and it actually came through on a couple of them. I only responded to it once. This was an article, how BYD blocked Onvo's production ramp up in China. It was written by someone who used to work for NIO for a brief period of time. My response to this was very simple. I don't consider him a credible source, talking about the guy who authored this article. And this dates back to before NIO hired him. I remember several years ago when he put out misinformation about NIO, I actually asked him to correct it. He never did. And since then, I've seen that this is perhaps a serial offender with respect to misrepresenting things, or and maybe it's unintentional. Certainly, no one's perfect. We all make mistakes. I have it right here on my Twixter. No one is perfect. Keep working. That's a note for me. And so with that in mind, I understand that people make mistakes, and maybe he has just misrepresented things on accident, but it's happened more than once, several times with NIO. And by the way, I've got him blocked, so I don't even see everything he puts out. So the fact that I have that awareness, and for me, it's kind of simple. If I'm going to stay in research mode, one thing that I value highly is my time. It's the one investment we don't get back. And so I don't want to waste my time following someone if I don't consider them credible, or if I have to then figure out what research they've shared that they're wrong on, that sort of thing. So in any event, again, kind of the brutal honesty, but I also wanted to pull this article. This is Reuters back in May, and make a point kind of related to this, and then move on and go a little deeper on the research side. So this is talking about NIO currently buying most of its batteries from CATL, and then it talks about BYD providing the battery packs for Onvo, and then they also mentioned CALB and CALB, or CALB, which is already a NIO supplier. That's important. I want to point something out with that. But before we do, the final thought here is, when contacted by Reuters, NIO said the information was inaccurate and did not elaborate. This is typical of NIO. And then the fact that CALB also declined to comment. But let's go back to the NIO part, because if we actually look at the way that this article, I guess, is led off by this party, who I don't consider a credible source, he says, although the company did not communicate the reason, so NIO has not acknowledged that BYD is the reason or the issue. And fun fact, I didn't even align it and pick it up or share it in this video, but in both the second quarter earnings and the third quarter earnings, William Li said that it's technology on the supply chain side that was going to take more time on the ramp for NIO with Onvo. So he said nothing about BYD or the batteries. So anyway, just pointing that out. Let's keep it moving, because the CALB, back to that point, this is NIO Capital. And I want you to just see this. Let's do this together. First of all, NIO Capital is, you might recognize the managing partner, this guy, William Li. And so William Li has access to and sometimes what we've seen is NIO will invest in some of these companies, but he has this awareness of all of these companies and what they're doing. And so you'll recognize a few that NIO has partnered with. For example, here's CALB. Now, the reason that I mentioned them is if we go back in time, and this is one of the other things I'm going to talk about publicly. I haven't talked about this. I don't think anyway. Back in the lockdown time for China, there was a point where CATL, which at that time was, the battery supplier for NIO, and NIO was heavily dependent on them, and they did not give NIO, they basically gave Tesla preferential treatment over NIO. Now they are partnered with NIO in the battery asset management company, and there are other things that they will continue to work together on. And William Li is not the kind of guy to out them or to call them out for basically not supporting or NIO during that time or giving preferential treatment to Tesla. However, we did see CALB start doing business with NIO after that point. At least that's when I registered it in mine and seeing that take place. And I think that was NIO not wanting to be too committed to just one party. And it also, I think, makes sense because even if NIO doesn't bring everything in-house, having multiple partners and being able to help build up other businesses globally just makes a lot of sense. So anyway, that's why I wanted to share that. We'll see how all this plays out, not just with Onvo, but also with Firefly and the announcements for that sub-brand that we'll get at NIO Day here later in December. Now, this is something, and I've seen this guy's been negative about NIO several times, and that's fine. Everyone's welcome to have their opinion. And the part that I took kind of issue with here is in his personal commentary, he said that NIO hasn't done any expansion for a year or longer. And so I wanted to make sure and share this with him so that he can look for himself in case he's not tracking NIO and the announcements with the partnership with CYVN and the MENA expansion and all of that, because he can see it right here that they are already now expanding into the Middle East. And in fact, here's from the NIO site. This is NIO House Abu Dhabi, the official opening, the christening, if you will, of the NIO House. And this was another one of those things that I just thought was worth sharing, especially with the time frame. Here's the funny part. So this is November 29th, 2024. And I want to go back to when he made this post where he's talking about NIO hasn't done expansion in a year. This is December 2nd. So kind of sleeping on that. And look, it's, again, I'm being a bit critical here, but I'm tired of seeing all the FUD and misrepresentation. I don't think that it's all intentional, but because I'm just tired of seeing it, I wanted to kind of address some of it. So here is Dong Mai Mai. If you haven't been over to his channel, he's a NIO user and he puts out some great content. And he went to Abu Dhabi and to Dubai and was there for the launch. And he kind of confirmed here what I was thinking and mentioned in a recent video, that some NIO, the premium brand vehicles, might have been shipped to be delivered in December. And he said the delivery of the EL8 will officially start next month in December. So that seems to be a validation. He also offered a few tidbits like, I think he said the total passenger vehicle sales volume for the UAE is something like 250,000 annually. He mentioned Tesla doing over 7,000 in a quarter. I don't remember if it was this quarter or on average, but that tells me there's certainly the potential for NIO to be doing a couple thousand deliveries. I don't necessarily expect that right away, but it's good to know that there's certainly that potential. I think NIO is going to be well received in the Middle East, and I'm very excited to see what the V2G potential with the power swap stations and solar panels on the roofs can do for the energy space. I think that could be a really cool play for NIO, and probably one of the reasons CYVN is excited about partnering with NIO. So this is the post that I made sort of after I realized some of these things, and just it seemed, and it was even so bad. I'll give you a specific personal reference to the last video that I put out and why I actually kind of hit pause on even responding to comments. So hang in there. I'll get that broken down in just a second. But here's the tweet. Elevated FUD lately. This is just my thoughts with respect to NIO stock. XPeng and NIO comparisons, they're all over the place. And I just get tired of it. But my thought is this: if you want to compare something from the NIO brand, let's wait and see what Firefly, the most affordable brand that NIO is going to come out with, or sub brand that NIO is going to come out with. Let's see if that isn't a better comparison for XPEV or XPeng. And then finally, I wanted to mention this because a lot of people seem to miss this completely. The Chinese market, we're talking the premium price range, that sub-segmented piece of the market, is the slowest to pivot from ICE or internal combustion engine gas vehicles to BEVs, battery electric vehicles. However, NIO has 48% of the premium BEV market. That's phenomenal. And there is so much more market share to go around that I just think it's going to be fascinating to see what William Li and NIO does in the short term with the NIO brand on margins and offering things to maybe keep sales at a certain level where he's going to want those to end up kind of short-term baselining at. If it'll be, let's say, a 15,000 number versus a 20,000 number on the monthly side. And then also as Onvo ramps, because again, we should see 10,000 according to the CEO of Onvo anyway. So let's see what happens if we get a 10,000 or better number in the month of December here for NIO with Onvo. But finally, this is the piece. And again, I'm going to share a little bit more than I typically do. This is kind of a one-off because I just wanted to be a little more brutally honest in this one. So here's what I've done. And this is also going to be a longer video. What I do with my longer videos is I create these timestamps. This is really for two reasons. One is for viewer convenience, so that if people do not want to watch the whole video, they don't have to. They can go, you know what, I'm wondering about, let's say this thing, coconut, Onvo, tech, supply chain reasons. Those are the reasons for the slower ramp. NIO, William Li, said nothing about BYD, nothing about the batteries being an issue. He talked about all tech stuff, and that was the recurring theme both of the last two earnings calls. So this is, I try to create this so that it's easier for the viewer, but it's also helpful for me so that I can go back and quickly reference something. And what I did is, because the last couple of videos that I've done, the video before this one, this is a 16-minute one here. It was about a 20, maybe 23 or 25-minute video. But this is me trying to break down and condense thousands of hours of research over the last few years, and then also break it down into as short of a time frame as I can, and then also create these timestamps so people don't even have to watch the full video. And so when I started seeing comments in this video in particular, and the comments were, there was a lot of whining and crying going on in the comment section, and in several cases, the folks didn't appear to have listened or watched the video, or at least not watched it in its entirety, because I addressed things in the video that they were complaining about. And so I just started doing timestamps and referencing specifically in either this video or other videos where I talked about it, because there's no reason for me to regurgitate stuff. My time is at a premium, and so is my viewers' time. I don't want our time wasted. We can make money, we can lose money, and we can make it again, but time we don't get back. And that's one of the reasons that I try to stay focused and kind of mired in the research mode all the time. And so as I saw some of these things all sort of happening in this last week, I just decided, let me do a video and let's call it Stop the NIO Stock FUD, or fake news, or whatever. And this is just kind of my thoughts on that. Finally, let's do this. Let's close out. Since it's been a longer video, I don't know how long, but let's go over to the NIO FTDs to see if anything significantly has changed. We're now at about 17.5 million shares traded on the day. Again, for me, the key, we get all the FTD data, delayed, lagged data, but the fact that we have these spikes and all these elevated levels, it just, I'm not surprised that we haven't seen a big move to the upside. However, I wonder if our simplest indicator is going to be really big volume with an obvious move up that continues over the course of days or weeks at a time. I hope you don't mind that I kind of went all over the place, but also was very direct and blunt with some of this. I do think that most of the people who watch to the end of my videos are folks who also value their time. And so I think they are more attentive to detail. They're also willing to do more research. And I welcome, any suggestions, thoughts, criticisms, whatever. But mostly I appreciate you taking the time to stick around to the end of the video. And I wish everyone the best. Have a great day. I'll see y'all again very soon.